This week, we bring you part 2 of our 2-part series on the Long Island serial killer. For this episode, I used Jacqueline Gallucci's reporting for the Long Island Press, Robert Kulker's reporting on the Gilgo Beach killings for New York Magazine, as well as bits and bobs from Kulker's excellent book, Lost Girls, An Unsolved American Mystery. And I also used the 2025 Netflix docuseries based on the book, Gone Girls, The Long Island Serial Killer, directed by Liz Garbus. I would recommend any of these things if you want like a little more in-depth information. They're great docuseries, really great book.
Also, I sent a little article that I saw your way that came out like yesterday.
I know.
Did you use that?
Yeah.
Okay, well then give me some credit, you know?
And then I also used this article that Nick gave me yesterday. But it's all over, so I didn't quote it.
All right. Thank you to everyone subscribing and liking on YouTube, following and reposting on TikTok, commenting on Instagram, subscribing to our free Substack, signing up on Patreon. You do get exclusive episodes when you pay for a Patreon subscription, but there's also a free option on Patreon, another good way to connect with us. Lots of fun, meaningful ways to support this little DIY podcast. Links in the show notes, plus info at www.murielsmurders.com/support. And if you just want to buy us a beer, you can do that too. You know, get us tipsy, baby. We're all yours.
Oh my goodness. Well, this is a true story involving murder, violence, drugs, adult themes, etc. So if any listeners are like Nick and they don't want to hear about those kind of things, go listen to a different podcast.
We also tend to joke and curse on this podcast. Another good listener discretion advised moment.
Yeah. All right, Nikki, are you ready to hear this story?
No.
Okay. Let's get started. Here we go. I'm not really doing a recap, right?
Yeah.
Our story picks up again with the discovery of 6 more sets of human remains found in the marshland near Gilgo Beach in the spring of 2011. These remains were different than the Gilgo 4. They weren't wrapped in burlap and bound, and the remains were much older. 4 out of 6 sets of the remains were partial. The bodies had been dismembered and scattered around Long Island. Mm-hmm. So there was Fire Island Jane Doe, later identified as Karen Vergata. And Karen was an escort who vanished in 1996. So, you know, a long time.
A long time ago.
Her severed legs were found in a garbage bag on Fire Island that same year that she disappeared. And she actually remained unidentified until her skull was recovered in the spring of 2011, along with the rest of the victims.
Man.
And then there was Jane Doe number 3, or Peaches. A bag of her dismembered limbs was found near Gilgo Beach with the other victims in 2011. Her dismembered torso was found packed in a Rubbermaid container in a state park on the west side of Long Island way back in 1997. She had a tattoo of peaches on her chest. Mm-hmm. And just recently, this is the article that you sent me, this Jane Doe was identified as Tanya Jackson, a 26-year-old Army veteran who'd been living in Brooklyn at the time and I think was working in healthcare or was assumed to be working in healthcare. Tanya was the mother of 2-year-old Tatiana Dykes, whose remains were found near Gilgo Beach in the spring of 2011 as well. So she was the mother of the baby Jane Doe.
R.I.P. So they found those in it happened in 2011.
So initially, she was an unidentified Jane Doe from 1997.
And they just identified her like the day before yesterday?
Yeah. So she had remained. A lot of these second sets of remains were not identified for years, partly because they were initially found, way back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Parts of their bodies. And the new parts of their bodies were found in the Gilgo Beach killings.
Man.
Then there were 2 women connected to the Manorville Pine Barren killings back in the early 2000s. So Pine Barrens are these pine forests. They're kind of rare and they pop up in otherwise barren land, places with bad soil. And in 2000, 24-year-old Valerie Mack's mutilated torso was found wrapped in plastic and dumped in the Pine Barrens near Manorville on Long Island. Valerie was a single mom. She'd been working as an escort at the time, and she was small, 100 pounds and 5 feet tall. Her hands, head, and right foot were found near Gilgo Beach in 2011, and she wasn't identified until 2020. No one had ever reported her missing. 3 years after Valerie's torso was discovered, another woman's mutilated torso was found in the Manorville Pine Barrens. And these were called, like, kind of locally, they were called the Manorville murders. Other bodies have come up, like, popped up in those same Pine Barrens, but these were the two that had a lot of similarities.
Okay.
In 2003, 20-year-old Jessica Taylor's torso was found on some plastic sheeting placed on a pile of scrap wood in the Pine Barrens. Jessica was a sex worker, and the tattoo of her pimp's name on her hip had been shredded with a razor blade. In the spring of 2011, Jessica's hands and skull were found near Gilgo Beach, just like Valerie. Now, the only victim out of the 10 remains still yet to be identified as an Asian person of Chinese descent. And police believe the victim was a trans woman in her late teens or early 20s who died of blunt force trauma to the head.
Just like RIPs all around. Like, how do you even handle that?
Yeah.
There's just too many. It's just so long.
So long and so many years.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they've been resting in peace ever since. It's just the scope of it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So reporter Jacqueline Colucci has written about many of these women. By 2011, she'd been writing about New York's unidentified murder victims for years. And what struck her about the Gilgo Four and the other victims found near the beach was the lack of media coverage or support from the community in finding the girls. Jacqueline found when the relatives of the victims did find a news outlet to cover their story, or if they made a post on social media, the comments were horrific, like trashing the victims for being involved in sex work, talking about how the girls deserved what they got, or like that they had terrible family. And when Jacqueline covered the stories,
who does that?
People behind a keyboard, man. So
God damn.
When Jacqueline covered the stories, she also received a ton of backlash just for covering them as a reporter.
I love this woman, by the way. Galucci?
Yeah.
Come on. I love her.
She even got backlash from other reporters and other news media outlets.
Like, why? Like, it's obviously like a story. Like,
yeah. No.
It's not like she's... It's just such a weird thing to get mad at someone for covering something that happened. You know what I mean?
I totally agree. I mean, it's obviously just like really horrible...
right.
discrimination and hatred and stuff like that. Misogyny. All right. But I guess even bad press is good press in some ways. And with the discovery of the 6 newest victims, this search for Shannan Gilbert was reinvigorated. Remember, Shannan Gilbert, the person who kind of kicked off this whole thing, her disappearance kicked off the discovery of all these bodies.
Yeah, that
she still hasn't been found.
Confusing 911 call that even... is the one that you came across. So she hasn't been found. So we don't even know where she is.
No.
And she was last seen alive by that retiree guy. She was banging on all the doors.
Yeah.
Some person answered, but we just left her with you just left her crouching behind that car. Like, did the guy see her run away? Or are you going to tell us about that later?
She kind of just disappeared. She
Okay.
was knocking on lots of doors in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So back in Oak Beach, where Shannan Gilbert disappeared, just beyond the gated community, there was this monster of a marsh. This place was so gnarly that locals never explored it. There were drainage issues. The marsh filled with brackish water when it rained. So there was seawater in there, really weird plants, horrible mud.
It's like, come on, God. I get it. You work in mysterious ways, but what's up with marshes?
Yeah, they're terrible.
Come on. I get it's mysterious, but damn.
It was packed with 100 acres of poison ivy, chest-deep mud, and 12-foot high brambles. And in the 2 years since Shannan went missing, police had never searched the marsh, right? Like, it's too hard, required too much manpower, et cetera, et cetera. But in December 2011, they finally explored it. And there in the marsh, just a couple hundred feet from the last door that Shannan Gilbert was banging on, screaming for help, police found Shannan's cell phone, her purse, her shoes, her lip gloss, and her jeans.
Wow.
Less than a week later, around 9 a.m. on the frigid morning of December 13th, 2011, police found Shannon's remains. Shannon was found about a half a mile from Joseph Brewer's house in the middle of the thick, uninhabited marshland. She was near the side of Ocean Parkway and about a mile from the bright lights of the Robert Moses Causeway.
Causeway?
So that's one of those things where, you know, like it's the shape of a butterfly or something like that, where like a bunch of like highways come together.
Oh,
and they
yeah.
circle around. I was going to explain that, but you made fun of me for not being able to explain what like a parkway was.
Well, oh, see, now you want to say parkway. You were like talking about roads and all that. You didn't even use the word parkway.
All
last time.
I'm saying, you've been driving for like 20 years. You don't know what a causeway is. So I was going to explain it, but you intimidated me and I didn't do it.
Look at us. We're our own worst enemies.
I know. I am mine.
Okay. Causeway. I got it.
So investigators' theory, Shannon wasn't killed by their mysterious serial killer. In fact, she, remember a young petite escort who advertised on Craigslist, was the only victim investigators definitely thought had nothing to do with the case. The Suffolk County Police Department announced that Shannon probably just got too high, ran into the marsh, and drowned herself. They hypothesized that Shannon had ran hysterically through Oak Beach, knocking on doors, and then into the marsh. And there she got wet and cold, and hypothermia set in. And she may have started experiencing something called paradoxical hypothermia, something that made her feel like she was overheating when she was actually freezing to death.
Oh, that's a crazy ass thing.
So Shannon, they say, ripped off her jeans and ran further into the marsh, half naked in just a bra and a blouse, trying to get to the Robert Moses Causeway for help. And a mile from the causeway, she drowned in the marsh and died. The Gilgo victims' families and Shannon's mother, Mary Gilbert, who remember were these huge they were huge advocates for their girls, and they had been being activists and on camera and all this kind of stuff, sort of, if not grouping Shannon with the Gilgo Four, at least saying like, obviously these cases are connected in some way, or she met a fate. You know, like there were lots of conspiracy theories, but they all centered around Shannon being a victim of a violent predator.
Yeah.
So they were just shocked. Like, how could Shannon run through the marsh with no pants on, no shoes? Why would that make any sense at all? Like, how could she not be counted among the other murder victims? It was absurd to them to think the woman whose disappearance led to the discovery of all of these murder victims died because she ran into a swamp screaming that someone was trying to kill her and just tripped and drowned herself, right? And when Shannon's autopsy results came back, they were inconclusive. The medical examiners said Shannon's cause and manner of death was undetermined, and that left Shannon the only person associated with the Gilgo Beach victims who is not considered a victim of homicide. And so, like, you know, there's a lot of, it was a big, like, kick in the face, right? And partly of what, like, one thing that was going on at the time is that Mary Gilbert was, like, really antagonistic. Sharon's mom was really antagonistic towards police and, like, kind of, you know, calling the investigation a clown show and like really talking about how her daughter wasn't being represented well in the media and all this kind of stuff. And then finally they find her remains and all of a sudden they saying, oh, she just tripped and died. Sorry. You know? So there was something felt very acrimonious, right? Between the two groups.
Yeah. Right. Sort of like insult to injury, I guess. In
a sense. Right. And also the FBI agreed with the findings. They had experts review Shannon's 911 call, and despite her yelling stuff like, they're trying to kill me, the agents and psychiatrists who examined the tape and then other evidence in Shannon's disappearance said Shannon's death was more likely just a tragic accident.
But what about, I mean, are they going into this guy's house and interviewing Brewer?
Yeah, they interviewed everybody.
Okay.
Apparently, I guess it's debatable, but I think they polygraphed Brewer too, and he passed. They were just saying there's a lot. I'm not going to go way into it because it's a lot, but there's some conspiracy theories involving other neighbors. There was this suspicious doctor that there were rumors going around, and Shannon's stuff was found like directly behind his house. There's rumors about how Joseph Brewer bragged about having sex parties, like with bringing girls in and then bringing residents from Oak Beach to these sex parties at his house, and there might have been this conspiracy cover up. There's a lot that has to do with that, but a lot of it is just like unsubstantiated. But here are some things.
Okay.
So the only drug the medical examiner tested Shannon's body for was cocaine. They did a hair test, and the test was negative. Now, the hair test, because the hair had been degraded after being outside for like 2 years, you know, before her body was found.
Right.
It wasn't 100% accurate, but it was pretty accurate, right? And if Shannon was supposed to be a drug addict, as like the police were kind of assuming she was, it was strange that her hair strand test was negative for cocaine. Now, they could have run some tests for other drugs using bone marrow that would have been a lot more accurate, right? And they could have tested for other drugs like hallucinogenics, the type of drugs that could have made Shannon lose her mind, like police were theorizing, right? So the medical examiner looked for bone marrow in one single bone. And when she didn't find any, she didn't look any further. And Shannon was never tested for any other drug except for cocaine, which seems a little strange.
Well, also say this, and I won't say why I know this, but I know you can take someone's hair to a lab and they can run a bunch of tests at once for like, you just click a box, drug, all the things you want tested.
Yeah.
I mean, at least nowadays, but maybe not for 2-year-old hair that's been in a marsh. And
I think their argument was they totally
2011.
could have they could have tested it, but they only tested it for cocaine, which just seemed weird to everyone and significant that it came out clean. And here's the other thing. Out of all of the bones in the human body, like there's 200 something bones or whatever.
Sorry, I'm just imagining all the shit you could find in my hair at this point.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, really, Nick? You're cutting down on your meat? How many times did you have smash burgers in the last month? Oh, look at you being so good. Cutting down on your booze, huh? What, are you not counting hard seltzers? Just like... all my meds, just everything.
You better keep your hair in a bun, boy. Keep
No,
that witch hair up.
You know, it's just like shedded everywhere. I've made this joke on this podcast before, but I literally could never commit a crime.
I know.
Because you wouldn't even have to test the hair. You could just follow the trail of hair that I've shed directly to me.
Plus, you love hugging people, and then when you hug them, at least me, leave hairs all over them. It just would be a disaster.
Don't tell the people that part.
All right. So, out of all the bones in the body, there's like 200 something bones, right? The only bones missing from Shannon's body were 2 little fragile hyoid bones in the neck. Bones that, if broken, typically indicate strangulation, which was the way all 4 of the Gilgo Four were murdered through strangulation. The medical examiners said the hyoid bones in Shannon's throat were just so small that a rodent could have easily carried them away. So the finding of these missing 2 tiny broken hyoid bones wasn't significant. That's what they decided. So there's a little bit of like, you know, mystery in her autopsy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the rat ate it is just, that's such a weird, like, oh, the dog ate my homework excuse. It's like, well, you know, a rat could eat it. I mean there are like muskrats out there, and they've been known to chew on a tiny
And the
bone.
body had been out there for a long time, and they were very small, but no other bones were missing, not the tiny bones in her hands or her feet or anything like that. All right. After all this, the police investigation into the Gilgo Four and other related victims seemed to stall out. So this is like a complicated political thing, but I'll give you as much of a nutshell as I can. Here are the bullet points. In 2012, just months after Shannon Gilbert's remains were found in the marsh, this guy, James Burke, was appointed the new chief of Suffolk County Police and took over the Long Island serial killer investigation. Now, this promotion was a big deal. Suffolk County has one of the biggest, most well-funded departments in the country, police departments in the country. And the appointment of Burke was kind of weird. So first off, James Burke was like 4 ranks below chief before his appointment. Definitely not next in line for police chief, or even someone who people thought would be in the running for chief. The thought that, was that he was a little underqualified. And then James Burke had a long history of being a problem officer, specifically with soliciting prostitutes while on duty, doing drugs, and having sex in his squad car.
Yeah, that's kind of a lot. That's
In fact, at the time of his promotion to captain, Burke had over 12 internal affairs complaints against him.
Is that like, I wonder, are there captains that don't have that, or police chiefs that are like...
I think that's too big of a question, but I do think, at least based on the documentary, this was like a very strange thing. So I think
he's like a low-ranking guy who just basically just only gets prostitutes while he's on the clock.
So it seems like he got his promotion largely on the recommendation of the Suffolk County District Attorney at the time. This really well-regarded, he had been in the position for a very long time. This guy, Thomas Spoda. So James Burke had been working at Spoda's office for about 10 years. And not only that, Spoda and Burke first met when James Burke was just a teenager. So back when Thomas Spoda was a brand new prosecutor, he had a big murder case in Long Island. It was a terrible case. In 1979, a 13-year-old boy named Johnny Pius was found dead on a playground, and he had been beaten and then suffocated when his attackers stuffed rocks down his throat. Now, there was a ton of pressure to solve the case, and Spoda zeroed in on a local teen or a local group of teens as the killers. Investigators got one of the teens to confess, but the confession was kind of wonky. Parts didn't make necessarily connect or make sense, and it probably wouldn't hold up in court. So to bolster the case, Thomas Spoda interviewed all these boys from the neighborhood. None of them would corroborate this kid's confession. No one except a 16-year-old juvenile delinquent named James Burke. So
as a kid?
That's when they met. So Burke told a story that helped Spoda win his first big murder case. Burke testified in court as a key witness, and Spoda won convictions against a group of boys. Boys, he said, killed Johnny Pius over the theft of an old motorbike worth about $5.
Motorbike's only worth $5.
Like some sort of, not a motorcycle, like a moped or some sort of old broken down thing.
Still $5.
1979. Are you focusing on the wrong thing or what? Jesus, you're like all over the place today.
No. I'm focusing on the fact that Burke has just been helping this DA since he was 16, since he was a child.
Yeah. So it sounds like, I'm not going to get way into it. It's actually a pretty complicated case, and I just was like, it's an offshoot to our story. So it sounds like there was some doubt as to whether the right people went to prison for the murder of Johnny Pius. Some think that justice was served, others don't. Now, some of the convictions in the case were overturned, and the defendants were retried or released. All in all, the case has an aura of sketchiness around it. There was like some things that were about the trial that were warranted retrials and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, after testifying like a few years later, James Burke became a cop in New York City. Then he transferred back to Suffolk County and started working for Thomas Spoda at the district attorney's office. Now, Burke spent his time being gross and racking up all kinds of internal affairs complaints without much consequence. And then out of the blue, he was promoted to the top law enforcement position in the county. And as soon as Burke took over as chief, the investigation into the Gilgo Beach killings slowed down to a crawl. Now, James Burke at the time allegedly told officers murders of sex workers were misdemeanor murders, not a high priority, that they were expendable people. And, the department certainly wasn't reaching out to the sex working community to get leads. Like, for instance, open calls where people could come forward with information without fear of being arrested.
Yeah.
They weren't tapping into any of those resources. And Burke stopped all collaboration with the FBI and other law enforcement agencies when it came to the Gilgo Beach killings. So all the valuable information the FBI was generating about the Long Island serial killer was totally disregarded. James Burke instructed his officers to close ranks, to reject help collecting cell phone data from the FBI. He stopped detectives from sharing data with the FBI's behavioral sciences unit, so they couldn't update the profile of the killer. And nobody really, on the outside, really knew why, right? Eventually, though, there was some leakage. So first...
Leakage? Muriel.
Mary Gilbert's lawyer found a sex worker who said James Burke had paid for sex with her at a party at Oak Beach in August 2011. Mary, her lawyer, and the woman took the woman's claims public, held a press conference where the woman explained how Burke couldn't get an erection with her, so he berated her and choked her. And even though that was like a big public embarrassment, the department pretty much dismissed her claim and it was never investigated. But in 2015, some light shined on this whole situation, and a theory emerged that maybe James Burke was dodging the FBI and was generally distracted from the Long Island serial killer case because he was trying to keep himself out of prison. See, back in December 2012, a year after Shannon Gilbert's remains were found, a group of young heroin addicts were breaking into cars in Smithtown, Long Island. They broke into an SUV and they snatched a duffel bag. And when they got home, they found it was filled with dildos, porn, and Police Chief James Burke's union cards. So eventually the kid who lifted the bag, Christopher Loeb, he was arrested for the theft. And during the interrogation, he called James Burke a pervert. And James Burke completely lost his mind.
Oh, no.
So in front of other officers, he beat Christopher Loeb, who was handcuffed, right?
Yeah.
Punched him, screamed at him, threatened to kill him with an overdose of heroin with a hot shot.
Jesus.
Other cops allegedly joined in, threatening to rape and kill Loeb's mother. After that, the department closed ranks and kept the beating a secret. They stopped collaborating with the FBI entirely, presumably to keep them from looking into what was up with the department or learning anything.
Just making yourself look so much more suspicious.
And then meanwhile, James Burke wasn't worried about being suspicious. He was known to keep a bunch of booze in his office. He used to get super drunk at work and then just drive around drunk, being an overall menace. He had people he didn't like civilians, tailed and surveyed by the department. He was very much doing a lot of stuff he shouldn't have been doing.
I just wonder if those heroin kids felt like they hit the jackpot with that duffel bag. Obviously,
nobody wants other people's dildos. That's not... That's absolutely 100% not a jackpot. You're out of your mind.
That's true. That's true. And also the ramifications were obviously dire and horrible.
No, that was a bag of
I just wonder, what would you give just to be a fly on the wall when they opened that duffel bag and realized what it was?
Honestly, if you're
start
in that
screaming.
zone where you're looking you need heroin so badly that you're breaking into stuff and you think you got a duffel bag full of electronics or guns or something you can sell and it's all used dildos, that's the worst. I think it would be incredibly disappointing. All right, so James Burke was finally arrested by the FBI December 2015 over charges stemming from the beating of Christopher Loeb and the cover-up. So Burke was convicted of civil rights violations and, surprise, famous DA Thomas Spota was also convicted. he was convicted for helping James Burke cover up the beating. They both spent a few years in prison. The day after James Burke was arrested, the deputy police commissioner announced the FBI was going to rejoin the Gilgo Beach murders investigation. And after Burke was released from prison a few years later, he was arrested again for exposing himself to a male park ranger and asking for a blowjob. So really, really didn't slow down.
Yeah, he's just a can of Pringles, man. Once you pop, you just can't stop.
All right, so back to the case,
Yeah.
Nicholas. That was horrible.
I mean, he just
Pretty
can't
funny.
stop.
It was
I
pretty
mean, he's
funny.
just
I
like
just
going.
ignored
It's
you,
just
but
like
I should have acknowledged that. You're right. Once you pop, you just
he's just like, gonna just ruin everyone's day for as long as he shall live.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, back to the case.
Okay.
In 2016, Mary Gilbert and her lawyer held a press conference to announce the results of an independent autopsy of Shannon Gilbert's remains. The new results were that Shannon did have neck injuries that were consistent with homicidal strangulation, but there still wasn't enough evidence to definitively state a specific cause of death. And then, just 4 months after releasing her oldest daughter's second autopsy results, Mary Gilbert was murdered by her middle daughter, Sarah.
What?
So Sarah Gilbert was considered the rock of the family
What
for most
are
of
you
her life.
talking about?
She was the surrogate parent to her sisters. She was like the detail-oriented one when it came to documenting Shannon's case. Now, like Shannon, Sarah had a hard time growing up, a pretty hard life growing up. She was molested by her mother's boyfriend as a child. She dropped out of school at 16 and had a baby with an abusive older boyfriend. The baby was named Hayden. And unlike her sister, Shannon, who had a bipolar diagnosis, as a relatively young kid, Sarah didn't seem to have those same struggles until Shannon disappeared. Now, Sarah was an advocate for her sister. She helped her mother get Shannon's name out there, but things took a turn for Sarah when police started finding body after body on Gilgo Beach. And then when they finally found Shannon in the winter of 2011, Sarah's mental health took a quick nosedive. In 2013, Sarah had a psychotic break. She started believing that she and Shannon had written songs for Beyonce, Jay-Z, and Rihanna, that Shannon was alive, and that her mom and sisters were possessed by demons. In January 2014, she was hospitalized after physically attacking Mary. And Sarah was in and out of hospitals and diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Jesus.
After that, she was put on an antipsychotic that was like a shot, so she didn't have to take regular medication. She'd get one, and then she would be okay for a while.
That happens too. Like a certain event can trigger someone's schizophrenia.
Yeah.
That's a common thing.
And
That's
she was in her
super common.
20s, which I think is like
That's also
in
common.
the ballpark.
Yeah.
So that worked until Sarah started avoiding getting the shot. She stopped taking her medications, and she started doing recreational drugs at the beginning of 2016. In February 2016, she drowned the family dog in front of her 8-year-old son. And then she bought a knife at Walmart and announced she was going to kill her son in the woods. Her boyfriend stopped her before anything happened. After that, Mary got custody of her son, and Sarah was hospitalized again. She became more unstable. She had an overdose. She overdosed on drugs. She kept refusing her medication. And on the morning of July 23rd, 2016, Sarah invited Mary over to her apartment in a tiny town in upstate New York at the base of the Catskill Mountains. Sarah stabbed her mom 227 times in the living room with a kitchen knife, and then beat her with a fire extinguisher and filled her mouth with fire extinguisher foam. Sarah had called her sister Sherry earlier to say she was hearing voices saying that Mary was the devil and a bad god. So Sherry Gilbert actually had called police for a welfare check. When police showed up, Sarah was there covered in blood with no pants on, smoking a cigarette. And she just simply said, "I am under arrest." Shannon Gilbert was just 52 years old when she died.
Shannon Gilbert, Mary Gilbert.
Sorry, Mary Gilbert was just 52 years old when she died.
R.I.P.
Yeah. In 2018, there was a major shakeup at the Suffolk County Police Department. Geraldine Hart, the former head of the Long Island FBI office, came in as the Suffolk County Police Commissioner. She was the first female to hold the position in Long Island history, and she started out by reinvigorating the Gilgo Beach murders case. They fully collaborated this time with the FBI in a massive investigation. They used genetic genealogy to identify some of the Jane Does, and genetic genealogy is the same thing that caught the Golden Gate killer.
Okay.
Right? Like it's like getting profiles from like family members and putting together a family tree to find the identification of someone rather than like direct DNA.
Okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to explain that to you for some reason.
No, that's okay. I mean, I don't really. Sure, I didn't know what it was. Then, yeah. So it's like if I'm supposed to be a suspect and they're like, we think this guy Nick did it, then they're gonna go get my family's DNA.
Or maybe it's in a database. Like so they could find your brother's DNA, or maybe your brother did some sort of database. He's in the DNA database, or maybe they're trying to identify your body. And they ask people to submit DNA who have a missing person that might fit the profile. So like they can use family members to build the tree. Say DNA says that this person is the sister of this person.
Got it. Yeah.
And also for the first time under Geraldine Hart, the department started sharing information with the public to generate new leads. Because at this point, the department had kept all their information really tightly locked down. In 2022, the Gilgo Beach murders had been languishing unsolved for 12 years. So while they made a lot of headway in the case, they weren't any closer really to solving it. Gertrude Hart stepped down and a new commissioner came in, Rodney Harrison, a police chief from the New York Police Department. Now, Harrison formed a task force with all the different departments, the FBI, state police, everybody that he could. And the new Suffolk County DA came in and cleaned up all the data on the case. Because obviously it's been 12 years. There's just piles and piles of analog data sitting in this place. So
they had to Marie Kondo it real quick.
Yeah, so he digitalized it, right? Digitalized everything so it was actually quickly searchable, right? And they got a break in the case almost immediately. The first meeting of the new task force was in February 2022, and they had the name of their first Long Island serial killer suspect just a few weeks later in March.
Drum roll, please.
Now, if you remember from the last episode,
just tell us who it is.
The last body dumped at Gilgo Beach was the body of Amber Lynn Costello. She was the one who lived in the party house in Babylon, whose roommate chased a humongous ogre-like man out of the house after the man attacked Amber during a sexual encounter, right? Well, at the time, Amber's roommates were convinced that the giant man was the man who abducted Amber the night she disappeared. And one of the roommates gave police a detailed description of this 6'8", 350-pound man, right? And the truck the man had been driving, a first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche. Well, at the time, police never followed up on that tip, and it just sort of got lost in the shuffle. Nobody had even seen it in like a decade, right? But now, in 2022, after all the evidence had been digitalized, they found it, right? So they used old vehicle registration records and found a first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche registered to a giant ogre-looking man living on Long Island. Investigators were aware of all the cell phone data the FBI had collected on the case over the years, and they discovered that
your eyebrows are getting higher.
They discovered that a burner phone had been constantly calling Amberlynn Costello right before she disappeared, as had been the case with the other Gilgo Four, that right before they disappeared, they had contact with a burner phone. Now, they knew the killer used burner phones in the area of Midtown Manhattan and in a small area of Massapequa Park, Long Island, to, contact his victims. And they found the humongous owner of the first generation Chevrolet Avalanche lived in Massapequa Park and worked in Midtown Manhattan.
And his name is it Joseph Brewer?
The suspect was a man named Rex Heuermann.
Okay.
He was an architectural consultant and married, father of two. And in a lot of ways, he fit that FBI profile to a T.
The Mindhunters got it right.
Yeah. So a bit of a loner, but active in his extended family's lives. He loved to organize things and plan reunions for the family. Rex had married his wife, Asa, a woman from Iceland who had a son from another marriage. And then the two of them had a daughter together and settled in Massapequa Park, Long Island. Now, according to family, Rex was just like a really great family guy. The only weird thing about him was his house. So Rex Heuermann's dad, he had violent rage issues. He would scream and belittle Rex in public. He would beat Rex. And as a kid, Rex was really introverted. So he was constantly bullied by other kids in the neighborhood. And he was a giant kid, but he never fought back. He didn't stand up to other kids. And he certainly never stood up to his father. Eventually, his dad died, right? And when he grew up, he stayed in his childhood home. He never moved, and he hadn't changed anything about the house ever in his whole life.
Did he move in his wife from Iceland and everything? Okay.
It had the same furniture and carpet and fixtures as it had for over 60 years. So he'd perfectly preserved the home where he'd been violently abused.
Yeah.
And, stayed in the neighborhood where he was relentlessly bullied.
Yeah.
His family said the inside of the house was like a horror movie. It was dark, dilapidated, falling apart. And this is his extended family, not his immediate family who lived in the home with him. In fact, also, Rex once made a commercial for his architecture firm, RH Consultants and Associates. And in it, he talked about learning how to build furniture from his father and how he had preserved and used his dad's shop and all of his dad's tools over the decades. So he talks about preserving everything of his father's. And in this video, he said, quote, "I build furniture at home and I still build it in the exact workshop. I have one tool that's pretty much used in almost every job, and it's actually a cabinet maker's hammer. It is persuasive enough when I need to persuade something."
Oh my God. So is that his murder weapon?
And as old and trashed out as the interior of the house was, the exterior was just as bad. His neighbors thought the whole family was bizarre and strange. The family never really spoke with anyone, and their house was falling apart. They thought Rex was way too weird, and the house was in such bad shape that they couldn't believe Rex was actually a successful architect, especially one with a Midtown Manhattan office.
Right.
Investigators found Rex Heuermann's personal phone records matched the movements of the burner phones used to contact the Gilgo 4.
Yeah. Don't take your regular phone with you when you got your burner phone with you.
That was a pretty big mistake considering how organized this guy was. And in 2023, they caught Rex Heuermann going into a store in Midtown Manhattan to purchase yet another burner phone. So when they searched Heuermann's emails, they found he had dozens of dummy email accounts that he was using actively to contact escorts. So he was buying burner phones, contacting escorts, and doing that all the way up until 2023 when they started surveilling
That's like
him.
yesterday.
Yeah. So police put Rex Heuermann on heavy surveillance, but they still needed more evidence to connect him to the murders. They wanted DNA. And eventually, Rex Heuermann scarfed down a bunch of pizza and threw the box with the crusts away on a sidewalk in Midtown Manhattan. Police got a DNA profile and were able to match it to a hair found on Megan Waterman, one of the Gilgo 4.
Whoa.
And Rex Heuermann was arrested on July 13th, 2023.
Eat your crusts, people. I mean, if you want to get away with stuff.
I know. Don't eat your crust.
I mean, whatever. You get what I'm saying, though. It's just like whatever your weird thing is that's going to be your downfall,
Police tore apart the Heuermann home for 12 days looking for evidence. He had like 300 guns. He had computers and laptops, and his searches, his Google searches were all about the Gilgo Four, the victims in the case, victims' families, the investigation, and then also just really horrible torture porn and child sex abuse content. They found the first generation Chevrolet Avalanche that originally connected him to the case on a property that he owned in South Carolina. And during this time, the family had kind of a weird reaction, the immediate family.
His children and wife and
Right.
stepchild. Yeah.
Police don't think the family knew anything about the murders, and his wife and 2 children were out of town on vacation during the times each of the Gilgo Four vanished. Right?
Which is what the mine hunters said was the case.
Yeah, that the family would be on vacation.
Yeah.
But after the search, the whole family, Asa Heuermann and their 2 adult children, moved back into the dark, torn-apart house where the murders are thought to have taken place. They barbecued outside in the junky yard with reporters crowded just a few feet away. His wife, Asa, filed for divorce, but she kept supporting Rex publicly. And they filed motions to get the gun collection back, which was not going to happen, but, they gave it a shot anyway. Rex Heuermann was charged with the murders of 3 of the Gilgo Four, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amberlynn Costello. And at his arraignment, he pled not guilty. On January 16th, 2024, police charged Heuermann with the murder of Maureen Brainerd Barnes after finding one of his wife's hairs on the belt used to bind her ankles. The task force started interviewing local sex workers and found 13 women who had interactions with Rex Heuermann at some point. And those were just the ones that came forward. After the interviews, they opted to go back to the Heuermann house to search again, this time focusing on the basement. They found computers that had been forensically wiped, but they were still able to pull some data. And they found a planning document on an old hard drive created in the year 2000. Instructions Heuermann had written for himself, including to-do lists and notes, all for effectively committing murders. Lists of equipment needed, tips for improving the hunt and getting rid of evidence, plans for dump sites and for dampening the sounds coming from the basement, and indication that he methodically tortured his victims and kept them alive for as long as possible. With this and other information, the task force broadened their search to include unsolved murder cases beyond the Gilgo Four. On June 6, 2024, police charged Rex Heuermann with 2 more murders. Jessica Taylor, one of the girls found dismembered in the Manorville Pine Barrens in the early 2000s, and a woman named Sandra Castillo. Now, Sandra was murdered in 1993 and is considered Rex Heuermann's earliest known victim. He was still in his 20s at the time.
Jesus, R.I.P.
Sandra's case had long been grouped with a different man who was serial killing sex workers on Long Island. Over 3 months between 1993 and 1994, 2 sex workers were found stripped, beaten, strangled, and posed in the woods. And their killer, John Bitrolf, was convicted of the murders in 2017. Now, Sandra Castillo's body was found around the same time as the other 2 women, and for a long time she was considered the likely 3rd victim of John Bitrolf. But Sandra's case was a little different. She had dozens of sharp force injuries, her body had been sexually mutilated after death, and she hadn't been posed. It turns out Rex Heuermann was connected to both Sandra Castillo and Jessica Taylor's murders through DNA, and specifically in the cases of Sandra and Jessica Taylor, their injuries resembled some of the disturbing torture pornography found in Heuermann's basement. In December 2024, Rex Heuermann was charged with the 7th murder. This is the final murder that he's been charged with. DNA linked him to the body of Valerie Mack, and that was the 2nd woman found dismembered in the Manorville Pine Barrens back in the early 2000s. Now, Valerie had been working as an escort out of Philadelphia at the time, and her story, reported on the evening news next to Rex Heuermann's mugshot, sparked a memory of another woman out of Philadelphia who said she had had a run-in with Rex Heuermann just 1 month after Amber Costello was murdered in 2010. So this woman who just went by Taylor in the Lost Girls documentary, she said she was 18 in the summer of 2010, working at a notorious strip club in Philadelphia called the Gold Club. Her friend's dad got her a job there. Anyway, she wasn't stripping. She was a shot girl. And that summer, guys were like literally flinging cocaine in her face, right? She was doing oodles of cocaine. And she said one night, this guy was basically feeding her cocaine and then said he had a proposition for her. He said if she sold some coke to his friend over there who was sitting in the club, then she could keep some of the profits, an easy job for great money. So Taylor was like, okay, whatever. Sure, sounds great. She's 18. She doesn't care. So she follows this gigantic middle-aged guy out to his car, gets in his car with the coke, and he starts driving. And he's driving and driving and driving. She has no idea where they're going. He's this mountainous ogre-looking guy. And meanwhile, Taylor is like 100 pounds soaking wet and looks really young. She definitely looks younger than 18. And the red flags didn't really start waving around until the guy starts talking about, does Taylor have any young friends or younger friends? And, how he has all these pedophilic fantasies. So it was about then that Taylor realized the guy from the club had just set her up for some sex thing. So she said she tried to play it cool. She didn't want to do anything like that, right?
Yeah.
But she also didn't want to upset this guy. So they get to the ogre guy's house and she walks in to set up her scale and weigh the guy out an 8-ball. And the house is completely dark, like totally pitch dark. There's no furniture. There's no lamps, no rugs or anything. There's mail all over the floor, like that had been shoved through the mail slot that nobody had checked, right? And there was just a milk crate on the ground with 2 beach chairs set up around it, and then a TV sitting on the floor playing a loop of porn. So Taylor says,
that's like a sort of an image you see in like horror films.
Exactly. Like she literally walked into a horror film. So Taylor said the man went upstairs, so she got the coke out and started weighing it, and it's starting to dawn on her how bad the situation actually is. And then she realizes she can hear a second person upstairs, sort of scurrying around, running, making noise, thumping, maybe even trying to get her attention or warn her. So that's when Taylor realized she was probably going to die in this house. So she whipped out her taser and she started running towards the door. But the big dude heard her and just like launches himself down the stairs after her, catches up with her, grabs her at the door. And she tased the dude in the neck and ran off into the night. She got away.
Good for her.
And when the Long Island serial killer started dominating the news cycle, Taylor saw the guy she tased right there on TV staring back at her. It was Rex Heuermann.
Yeah.
Rex Heuermann traveled a lot. He had properties in other states. He had tons of dummy email accounts and burner phones. And he's probably been active for close to 2 decades before getting caught. No one really knows the extent of his crimes. Today, Rex Heuermann is 61 years old and in jail awaiting trial. As of now, he's charged with killing 7 women between 1993 and 2010, and he's pled not guilty to all charges. That's the end.
That's the end? So what? So we still don't know what happened to Shannon?
No.
What? And we don't, and Joseph Brewer, he's innocent.
Apparently.
Apparently? He hasn't been charged with anything.
No. And neither has Michael Pack, her driver, none of that stuff.
See, that's why I have to ask if we're supposed to when you paint these pictures of these people and I'm like, are they bad or not? It helps me understand if I should be judging them or not.
But that's the thing. Is nobody knows.
There's probably good things about.
I just did say take it as a lesson about humanity.
I'm taking a lesson about myself and you.
Okay.
That you're tricky. You're tricky.
I'm not tricky.
You are. You got me all on camera, on mic, judging this guy. You know? Man, innocent until proven guilty. I apologize to that dude. I mean, not Rex, obviously. I mean, I don't know. Whatever. I don't know. Is he going to be innocent? You don't even know.
Well, he hasn't had his trial yet.
Damn, Muriel.
I mean, I'm pretty sure he's guilty.
Yeah, he seems very guilty, but shit, you know? I'm not trying to be like all in the court of public opinion. Like, you know what I mean?
Why don't you tell me if he's bad or not? Tell me he's bad or good. What do you think that is?
That's
the court of public opinion.
Okay, no. I need to know who admits to certain crimes or who's just been straight up convicted and it's obvious. I'm not down with all this gray area shit, you know?
Yeah, well
damn. It's horrible, man. R.I.P. all those poor people.
Yeah,
young girls and shit.
I mean, it was just this tiny area, you know? I mean, it's Long Island, but even the barrier island was just so small. It's just like so insane to me. And thinking about what it would be like to live in one of these communities on the barrier island.
Yeah.
You know, just sort of, you know, getting the brunt of the weather, living amongst these like uninhabitable marshlands and like in this really desolate area. But
they're all naming like the grossest cocktail after you, Long Island iced tea.
I love Long Island iced tea.
I mean, they're great, but they are like the trashiest drink.
I mean, specifically like Oak Beach and Gilgo Beach, like that spot, that area is just like such a crazy, you know. Everybody knows each other. I think the biggest community was like 154 people or something like that. You know, it's like there's little communities along the way.
Well, it's just crazy because you never know what's going on behind someone's closed door, let alone inside someone's heart or mind or soul or spirit or whatever, right? But then it's like you never know what's going on behind someone's closed door. But then also, this guy seems to have been operating literally as the world's most stereotypical, like, torture porn serial killer in like the modern era. Like right now it was operating up until like the day before yesterday, you know, and it's like, you know, it's
a year ago, but
a year ago. I mean, just saying so recently, you know, so recently. I don't know, it's just like he's I don't really know what I'm trying to say.
Well, I mean,
it's
like
just crazy that the stereotypical archetype not only exists but also is like effective in today's world.
Yeah.
You know?
Totally. I mean, people kind of, they're like, yeah. I mean, we all know. I mean, that's the thing. You're saying you don't want to judge people, right?
Yeah.
It's like, we know people are just, oh yeah, that person's a little weird, or that's kind of strange, you know, or red flag over there, but you don't do anything about it.
Well, living in the house too, that you were like grown up abused in, and staying in the neighborhood that you were, you know, bullied in. It can go both ways. Like on some level, that's like this great like reclaiming power move, maybe.
Well, to me, not if you keep like every stick of furniture, you know, and like I think that there's something about. I don't know if you're reclaiming anything. It sounds like it was just a shrine.
Well, it doesn't even sound like he was refurbishing it. Actually,
no, he wasn't.
Right. He's saying he's just letting it rot.
Keeping it. He's letting it rot around him. He's living in a rotting house around him. He's just letting it rot and doing commercials where he talks about his persuasive hammer.
And sorry, what's going on with his adult children and wife?
I don't really know. They all just live in the same house.
They still live in that house?
Yeah. They still live in that house. The
okay.
documentary has caught them in kind of, they seem very strange. I don't know.
So they're, how are they portrayed in the documentary?
Kind of like Boo Radley-ish, like staying inside, sort of quiet, won't talk to the press.
Yeah.
The wife is very angry, which I get, you know, and the police, like, when they searched their house, they destroyed the house. I mean, it was just like, it's already in shambles, and then they just like ripped the whole thing apart. And then it sounds like they might not have any money. So they like, I don't think that his wife worked. So like now they're moving back. I don't know if they had anywhere to go, but now the whole neighborhood knows what happened in that house.
And they're still living there.
Yeah. Adult, and their kids are in their 20s, I think. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that they don't have any other recourse, but you know, it's pretty intense. feels a little like Deliverance, like they're barbecuing on the porch and
Yeah.
it's like all falling apart and they're just like, get out of here. You know, it's very,
Well, they have other properties, South Carolina. I don't know. Whatever.
I don't know.
You're right.
I
Here
don't
I am
know.
judging again. God.
I know. You say you don't want to judge. You love judging.
Man, such a hypocrite. All right. Is that a good note to end this thing on?
And scene. Thank you so much for listening. Take it away, Nick.
We absolutely love our listeners. Thank you so much for sticking with us through the end of part 2.
Yeah.
It is only part 2, but it also feels like a ... to be continued
Well,
kind
we'll
of
see
situation.
when the trial comes out.
Yeah, Muriel did all the research and the writing and the hosting. I did everything else. You know, find us. You're listening to us online. With a couple of clicks of the button, you can find other ways to connect with us, and we really do appreciate that. And
Thanks for allowing us to do what we like to do.
yeah, and share this podcast with people that you think might like it. That's I should look into the camera when I say that.
Looking at me?
Yeah, I was looking at you.
How
Like,
about
hey,
I'll
Muriel.
look into the camera too.
Yeah, start telling people.
I don't know what
okay,
the thing is.
just look. Okay, we're looking at it. Share this podcast with the people in your life that you think would enjoy it, because we want this thing to grow, and that's the number one best way to make that happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye. We love you. Peace be with you.